everybody. I decided that I wanted to start a YouTube video, and I'm not a licensed professional, and I'm not saying that you have to follow everything I say, but I am hoping that somebody can learn something or benefit from my life experiences and how I handled a lot of the things that I've handled. I've gone through a lot in my 29, almost 30 years of life. I'm going to be 30 in like a month and a half, give or take. And it's been an extremely long, difficult journey. I don't know how I got through a lot of it. I know some of the stuff that I used to cope definitely have benefited me over the years. And I guess I just kind of also wanted this as a place to vent and hopefully eventually answer people's questions and move from there. So I guess I'll just give you a little background about myself. Like I said, I'm 29. I'll be 30 in March, which also happens to be my remission birthday. That's what I like to call it. I like to call it my unbirthday. So that's March is like a big month for me now. Sorry. I've always liked birthdays. Birthdays are like one of my favorite things. I don't necessarily has to be my birthday. I like birthdays, so I make a big deal about them. So I've definitely made my remission like a birthday, essentially. Like I like the idea of thinking like, oh, it's like another birthday party. So in March I'll be in remission 2 years. It was a long road to get there. I was sick for almost 3 years, I want to say, before they finally found the cancer. While pregnant, nonetheless, it was kind of traumatic. And even though it was like a very big deal, I kind of think I handled it a lot better than I thought I was. I don't think I would have handled it so well if I didn't have the baby, in all honesty. Um, so, yeah, I lost my train of thought, which happens a lot. I know a lot of doctors say chemo brain doesn't exist, but I feel like between all the mom groups that I'm in with the cancer and like even people who I've met over the years, like chemo brain is real. I don't care what the doctors say at this point. I lose my train of thought so much that even when I'm writing, I've been like playing with the idea that I wanted to like write a blog or maybe a book, but I can't really kind of like put it on paper. It's hard because I lose it, and then when I'm rereading, I'm like, this jumped around like 6 different places. So I feel like maybe that's why the YouTube video would be better, just because it might be a little bit easier to follow my rants and craziness. So now that we detoured once, let's try to get back on track. So I was sick for a long time, like I said, 3 years, and it started off with when I think back about it, probably the bronchitis should have been the first thing that should have alerted me as a red flag. I had bronchitis for almost 3 months, and I don't want anybody to think like, oh my god, I have bronchitis, I have cancer, because that's not the case. Because mine definitely was like a gradual thing. It wasn't like I had one sickness and then I had cancer right away. It took, like I said, 3 years to really get diagnosed. So I had the bronchitis for almost 3 months. I finally got healed from the bronchitis, but not really, because after that, my body just kept feeling beaten up and tired. Beaten up and tired. And it was difficult. There was days where I was like, I'm just exhausted and drained. And I was still not feeling well and still not feeling well. And during that time, my husband and I were trying to have a baby. We had a really hard time conceiving, which that in itself is a whole nother topic that I would like to discuss, because I know that for me was really difficult enduring loss, and just infertility is, I feel like, it's such a taboo concept or like topic. People don't really talk about miscarriages, don't really talk about treatments, don't really talk about even like considering adoption, how difficult, how expensive, how many exclusions there are. And that's why I'm like, I feel like that should be like its own video for me personally. Like, I just remember dealing with a lot with that, and the struggles and the pain, and there was times where I lost faith in God, and I know that's like a hard thing. And now I'm not super religious, but I did grow up going to Christian church and Catholic church because I like both churches. So I'll go to both still to this day. And there was times where I just kind of felt really angry about that topic, but all internally. Like, I never really told people like, oh, I feel this. I kind of just always the gotta put a smile on your face and move on kind of a thing. So I had a few people who knew that I was going through this, and they would tell me, well, I heard this medicine can do X, Y, and Z, or these side effects. So a lot of it, I was, to this day, I don't know whether it's infertility treatment side effects, my body just not handling things the right way, or just me being literally very actually sick. So after that, I kind of was better for a little while, and then I was still feeling running down and tired, and it seemed like I was getting sick more often with little stuff. I would get a cold, I would get a fever, and that lasted about 8 months. And then I remember my husband and I went to Tennessee on vacation, and we were so excited. Like, we were gonna go away. It was just gonna be like a 3-day weekend thing. We got a gift from one of his brothers, and I got there, and I feel like that's when it all went really downhill. And I had these fevers that just wouldn't go away. And I had like 103 fever, and I couldn't figure out why. And I was drinking medicine, and my body started to get hives, literally hives. And I was just like, I just don't know what's wrong. And I mean, I have pictures from that trip where I am smiling and I have my makeup done and I'm walking around because I refuse to let it ruin the trip, because that's just who I am. I just didn't want it to ruin our vacation, and I was just popping ibuprofens in, and just like, it's just a little fever, it's fine. And I came home and I got bronchitis again. So I thought that was what's going on. I was like, oh, I just had the bronchitis came back, and this time I kind of was prepared from last time. And then that went away, but I was still not better. And the fevers were not stopping, and I was like 103. And that seemed to be like my normal number at that point. It's like I would get a fever and it would shoot up to 103. So I wouldn't go to the hospital until after 103. So if I had 102.8 fever, I would just tough it out. And it was constant. And then I remember I started to get neuropathy. So if you don't know what that is, that's when your nerves, you get that pins and needles feeling, like your body, like that falling asleep feeling. And that was happening often. And I made an appointment to my doctor, because that's something I'm really good about, is I go to the doctor for everything. I feel like that's why I have insurance. And I always joke that I'm the person that WebMD has, like, when you have like that crazy disease, you put your symptoms, I'm that person on the top. Like, they put that because of people like me. But I never want to believe I'm sick. So I kind of was like always downplaying it a little bit, but giving enough where how worried I felt, that's how much information I would give. And I remember this one time, it was during the summer, I think it was maybe July or August. I looked down while I was driving. I don't know why, I think I wanted to change the radio or something. And I happened to look down a little bit, and my vision went black while I was driving. And I don't think I have ever been so scared in my life, because that's like a very intense feeling. And thankfully I was almost home, and I was in one of the back roads, so thankfully I wasn't in the highway or anything. And I remember thinking that I had already called the doctor, because when I would bend my neck down, my legs would fall asleep. I would get that pins and needle sensation. And I went to the doctors. I called them right away and I said, this is what happened. They had me come in. They did some tests. And I remember they were like, you have to go to the ER. And of course I had driven myself to the doctors because if you know me, like, I will do it myself. I got it. I can figure it out. Even if I have my husband available, my parents, anybody, like, I'll just do it myself. I don't like to worry people, which I think that's something I've learned over the years, that I have to be willing and accepting of help, not because I'm not strong enough or I can't handle it, but because it's okay. And also, them offering it doesn't mean because I'm not good enough. It's not that they do it because of a bad reflection of me, but versus that they do it as a caring and loving situation. So I went to the ER, and that's when they found my first masses. They did a panel of 100 diseases, because at that time when I walked in, I had 103.6 fever, I think. It was a high fever. And they did a panel of 100 diseases, and it took 3 months to get some of the results. And everything came back negative. So I had no infections or viruses. They did an MRI, and during that MRI is when they found masses in my neck and in my brain, which they eventually told me they were lesions, and I had to go see a neurologist the next day. So I had an emergency appointment with the neurologist. By now, I had already seen some other doctors, infectious disease, while they're still trying to figure out what's happening. Because even though I saw black, prior to that I had already been getting these high fevers. So they were still trying to figure out what was wrong. And I wasn't really getting any answers, which stinks when you're sick, because most people just go to the doctor, and even if they tell you something crazy, it's okay, because once you know what's wrong, you can manage it, whether it's actually curing yourself or just pain management or handling the disease. And I would always just pray for a diagnosis. Like, that's all I wanted to know. I didn't even care what it was. I would say, like, if I'm gonna die, at least I want to know I'm dying in 6 months, so I can, I guess, plan accordingly. That's how my mind works. Like, I just want to be able to plan. I like planning. And I go to the neurologist, and the tests start to run. And those tests are horrible. I hated all of those tests, to be honest with you. They were so... People who have to deal with MS or any of those neurological, like, nerve kind of diseases, I give you a lot of credit for how strong a lot of these people do everyday life. Like, it is hard. I remember thinking, like, is this going to be the rest of my life? Like, how am I going to live the rest of my life? And at the time, I was 26, 27. I'm not an old person. I'm still young. I still think even now that I'm 30, I still think I'm pretty young. And they started to do the test, and they were horrible. I would dread every time I had to go, and I would have to go every 2 weeks. I would have to get blood work, and every 2 weeks there was another test, whether it was an MRI. I got to the point where the MRIs, they're long tests, but that machine's so loud that I would just sleep through it, because my body was just like, this is going to take forever. And mentally, I was like starting to shut down a lot of, like, the negative stuff. So whenever I would be doing anything that I wasn't really into, whether it was the MRIs or the CAT scans, I just fall asleep. To this day, I can just literally will just get comfortable and will sleep. Whether it's a 5-minute test or an hour and a half test, I will sleep through the whole thing, even in that machine. So it was test after test, and they originally diagnosed me with transverse myelitis, which is a symptom of a disease. So I didn't even get a real disease diagnosis, which kind of was the worst. And it could be either MS, they said. It could be cancer related. It could be from Lyme disease that had attached to my spine, and more tests and more doctors. So I started to see a rheumatologist who took out lupus, took out several kinds of lupuses. He then sent me to an infectious disease doctor, another one, for the Lyme disease. So for a while I thought I had Lyme, and that wasn't it. Then the rheumatologist and the neurologist both sent me to the oncologist, which will eventually, when we get to that part of the story, will diagnose me. And I had a bone marrow biopsy, which is like the worst. I still have pain from that, in all honesty. That's probably one of the worst things that I've ever had to get done. Considering everything else, I think that was the most painful test ever. I didn't know people can handle them really well, but I was not one of them. So I had one done and it came back inconclusive. So 3 weeks later I had to go back and get it again. And it was still abnormal, but not cancerous. And the first time that it came back, they thought I had multiple myeloma, which is cancer in the bones, and they kind of explained to me if it's that it's a very aggressive cancer, not a lot of people survive. So of course I Googled it, and that was like the worst thing in the world, because I really thought I was dying in a year. And okay, so I have a baby now, my 2-year-old. I know we're cranky because we just woke up. It's kind of semi-early. So I was saying the multiple myeloma, and thankfully I didn't. I also during this time had a swollen lymph node, which I have scars here, that they had taken out, and that came back the same way, abnormal but not cancerous. And that was just my MO. Like, it was always abnormal but not cancerous. My blood work always came back very crazy. All my numbers were always off, and they kept thinking I had cancer, but they couldn't find the cancer. And I wish I knew more about this stuff than I do now, because had I known, I probably would have pushed for that PET scan a lot sooner. I mean, I know things work the way that they need to, but I think had I known more about how insurance works and how you really need to be an advocate for yourself, I definitely would have pushed for that PET scan, because I got pregnant. I found out I was pregnant in February. And at that time, when I got pregnant, I was on so much medicine that I'm surprised I even got pregnant. And it's such a blessing, and I'm really thankful, because now I have this great, awesome 2-year-old who, even though he's a little cranky right now, he's probably like the happiest human being I have ever met. You put chapstick on. He loves chapstick, it's his favorite. So I got pregnant, and I had to stop taking all my medicine because none of it was pregnancy friendly. And I couldn't stop taking it all at once, because my body can go into shock, which is scary in itself. And I was super happy and excited, I remember, and they kept telling me that if this is an autoimmune disorder, with you being pregnant, we still won't be able to diagnose you. But how pregnancy works is your body's immune system starts to suppress. That's why pregnant people have to be careful about getting sick. so that your body doesn't reject the baby. And the further along I got into my pregnancy, the better I felt. I felt amazing the first few months. I got morning sickness the first maybe 4 or 5 weeks of my pregnancy, maybe the first 6 weeks, and then it just went away. And I found a great OBGYN, and if you're in New Jersey, you should definitely check Dr. Wiener. He's like the best doctor ever. I'm not a paid sponsor or anything. I'm not, but he really saved my life because he listened to everything I said, and he's such a knowledgeable doctor, and he works with midwives in his office, in his practice. So he was very great about, well, with your TM, I didn't want an epidural, and I had talked to my neurologist about it, and even though she said the risks weren't crazy, they were, for me, high enough. I don't remember the exact statistics right now, but after I did a lot of research about it and I asked, and the epidural could put me in a way higher risk of becoming paralyzed, and I wouldn't know if I was going to be paralyzed for 6 hours, 6 days, for the rest of my life. It was just I was too afraid to do that with a newborn. And he was really understanding about it, and he did his research, and he came back and he said, I agree with you. There's no need for an epidural if you're willing to not take one. He's like, we have great methods, and with the midwife, will help you the whole pregnancy so your body starts to prepare. So he was amazing. So Dr. Wiener in Param is probably like the best OBGYN I've had. The whole experience was amazing. I got ultrasounds very frequently, and he makes you feel like you are a superstar. And I've heard this from other people who have been to his office. Like, he'll make it seem like you are doing the most amazing thing in the world, because in his heart he really feels that, like, you are amazing, you're giving life, and you can tell he loves his job. And as I was becoming further along, I think I was about 31 weeks when I had another lymph node, same left side. This seems to be my cancer side. Started to build. Before that, I was getting contractions and I was bleeding, and we couldn't figure out why, because everything seemed normal with him, and they just couldn't figure out why I was bleeding and having so many contractions. So I had already been in bed rest since week 29, where I was only allowed to be up for 1.5 hour increments, but not like 1 hour and a half and one. It was more like if I'm up for 1.5 hours, then I have to be in bed for the rest of the time. And they were really big on the bed rest for the contractions, and I was on medicine to slow them down. And at 31 weeks, I had a lump. And I thought I was getting sick because most of my pregnancy, I had what they called the pregnancy sniffles, where I just seemed to have a runny nose, and I wasn't sick. And it was just this little runny nose that almost like if I had allergies when I didn't. So I thought maybe I'm getting really sick. So I go to my doctor, my primary doctor, which I got really lucky in finding good doctors. I suggest anybody who's looking for a doctor, no matter where you are, I do a lot of research before I pick a doctor. I go on multiple sites. I Google Yelp You. I will all the doctor sites. I read at least 3 of the doctor sites plus Google Yelp reviews, and I really make it an effort to do the research, because I feel like doctors kind of are like, they have a lot going on, and I know it's a really hard profession, so I always like to make sure that a doctor is going to be willing to cater to me, especially because I've never been a healthy person to begin with. Most of my life I've always been pretty sick, not with crazy major things, but sick enough where I know that if somebody's not paying attention to me, it gets worse. I mean, ended up with 2 ulcers at 18 because every time I would go to the doctor, they would tell me it was a stomach virus and just kept giving me antibiotics and antivirals, and it got really bad. Both ulcers got. I'm still dealing with them at 29, where I can't eat a lot of food because I got sick. And just from that experience, I was like, I need to do research. Yeah, right? We got to do our own research. And you're so cute. So I did a lot of research and I found Dr. Jones, and I got to his office on a Tuesday and he felt my neck, and I was so stronghold that I just needed steroids. I was like, can I just have antibiotics and steroids, because that's what makes it go away. Because after the lymph node removal, I had gotten the biopsy. After that biopsy, I had gotten other lymph nodes that had swollen up, and that's what they did. Antibiotics and steroids. It always took it away, and I was very like, I already talked to my OBGYN, and he says steroids are okay, and the antibiotics are fine at this point in pregnancy. You can call him. And I'm so happy that nobody listened to me, because he said no. He's like, I'm not 100% positive that this is just you're sick. I think maybe something's wrong. And he's like, you have to go back to the oncologist. And I was so annoyed. I was like, this is ridiculous. I'm not even supposed to be out of bed this much, and now you're gonna make me like schmuck my way to the oncologist, and I have to ask people to drive me because I really shouldn't be driving this pregnant with contractions, God forbid. So then my poor husband had to like rearrange his life around me, which he will tell you he never mind. But it's annoying, like having to go to doctors and doctors. So that was a Tuesday. He called the oncologist for me and got me an appointment for Thursday because he thought it was rather important. So I go Thursday, and she's like, I don't think this is an infection. I think maybe it could be a little tumor just from your other sicknesses. It might have just kind of like expanded a little bit. So we're at 32 weeks pregnant, and I'm going back on Tuesday to get an ultrasound, which I didn't make because in that weekend my tumor grew so big that I couldn't breathe. And I remember feeling, was that at 30? No, I was 33 weeks at this point, because I was 31 and a half when I found it. I made the appointment, I was 32. So at 33 weeks, I was supposed to get the ultrasound, and I couldn't. It just swelled up too much. They did give me steroids at the ER, and they made it go down significantly. I had to reschedule, and I had an appointment with my OBGYN, and they couldn't reschedule me to the following Thursday. So then I was supposed to wait a little over a week, and I went to my OB that same Thursday, so I was still 33 weeks at the time. Sorry if I'm messing up the timeline a little bit or like kind of backtracking. It's just those weeks were like intense. And so I go on Thursday, and the tumor's a decent size. It's not a tiny thing. I will definitely try to figure out how to post pictures of it, but it was a decent size, and it wasn't so much outwards at that point. It was pushing towards my esophagus, so there was a lot of times where I could not breathe. So they did an ultrasound on it, and the ultrasound tech's face, I remember seeing her face, and she tried to kind of warn me what it was, but I refused to believe her. She was telling me how her husband had something like this, and she knew it was something else. And she called Dr. Wiener in, and then Dr. Wiener said, you need to go back to your oncologist. And I said, okay. And he's like, make sure that you do a biopsy, make sure, like, at this point, we are like a team. So he got on the phone with my oncologist, and he came back. He said, I already spoke with her. She isn't in the office on Friday or Monday, but Tuesday 9 o'clock, you're the first appointment. They're gonna see you first, so make sure you get there early, so you're pretty much taking somebody's appointment. And I said, okay. And I went on Tuesday. I was on steroids, like I was on a steroid pack, which was helping me. I felt great, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna give and the whole time I was complaining. If they had just gave me the steroids when I had asked for it 2 weeks ago with the antibiotics, I would be fine. None of this would be happening. Obviously, I was wrong, but you know, you think you know everything, especially after you've been through so many appointments. You think you kind of are the expert. So I go, and she sees my ultrasound results. And on top of that, she had already done blood work. My iron was so low that she needed to pump me with iron. So I was then on an iron drip on top of it, on top of everything. And she was like, I don't feel comfortable doing a biopsy with you this far along because we would need to put you fully to sleep. And if you were to need a C-section, I would also have needed to be fully put to sleep because I couldn't get an epidural. And since there were so many factors playing, it was so where I was like kind of having to go back to my OBGYN. So I went back. I was doing the iron drip. I was on steroids. They put me a little bit of higher dosage on steroids. My OB kept telling me steroids were great. Helps with the lungs when people have to have emergency. Yeah, baby? Yeah. When babies are born early, they pump moms for steroids to help with the lungs, so it's not a big deal. So now I'm 34 weeks pregnant, and I still am not feeling good. And I remember I once again couldn't breathe, and I was forced to go back to the ER. And by then, I remember looking at myself and looking like I look so sick. Like I don't look like a healthy person. I just don't. And I still put a smile on my face and pretend like it didn't faze me, but it did. Like I was annoyed with life at that point, and I was mad at everything and everybody, and I didn't really express it at all. I just kind of kept it to myself. And I'm a rational person, and I over-rationalize things. So you could do anything to me, and I will rationalize why you behave that way, and I try not to take it personal. That's just my personality. And I sat there and was like, my husband rushed me to the ER. They pumped me with steroids again. And I was 35 weeks. It was the Sunday, so I had just turned 35 weeks pregnant. And I remember thinking, this is like a lot more than I bargained for. Like I didn't expect this, and of course I'm worried about my son. The contractions are really pushing now, and I'm still on the medicine. So even with the medicine, my contractions are going, and I'm only 35 weeks pregnant. I go to my OB on a Wednesday. I don't remember. I went to my OB that week, and I went back to the oncologist to get another IV drip, iron drip, and it was decided that Friday I was going to start getting induced. But because of the tumor, I couldn't get induced fully. So I ended up having to be in labor since Friday at 3 o'clock. And I didn't have my son till Sunday around 6. So I was in labor for a while. And which was good because Sunday he turned exactly 36 weeks pregnant. I was 36 weeks pregnant, so he was only a month early. So I was kind of glad that he cooked in there those extra couple days. But during that time birth was intense. I know it's intense for everybody, I think. I don't think anybody can tell you that maybe, I don't know. I'm sure people walk in and have these babies and like it's like the most wonderful thing in the world. But mine wasn't. Mine was definitely not that. Mine was like a lot. It was a lot. I remember being in labor forever. Yeah, right. We were in labor forever. And he really didn't want to come out anymore. He decided to kind of, instead of going down, he went up. And that made things harder. Yeah. And I was about to be, it got to a point where the tumor had gotten really big that I had no blood circulation in this part of my cheek. Like they drew a line on my cheek because it was white and cold to the touch, so that meant there was like no blood anymore. It was just the tumor was there, and I couldn't always breathe, and I was in and out of it. I was on probably way more morphine than I should have been on, I think, because I was in so much pain. I couldn't breathe, and a lot of the pain was in my face, which I don't remember contraction pains, which I guess I guess that's a good thing, but even days after, I remember saying, I don't remember what the contraction felt like. I just remembered feeling like my head was gonna explode off. It was so painful the whole time, and they were going to take me through the ambulance to Hackensack Hospital, which is another hospital, because they thought that there was just too much risk happening here. But they couldn't, because I was already dilated. I hadn't dilated this whole time, but I dilated and I was already, yeah. Oh yeah? Oh. Excuse me. So I was in active labor, so legally you're not allowed to transport somebody when they're in active labor. So I had to have the baby there. And I'm really glad that they didn't take me to Hackensack to give me a C-section, because we had no idea I had a tumor by my pelvic area. And that was the reason why my son why I was having contractions and bleeding for so many weeks prior to having him. And had they opened me up and done everything, more surgically, there was a bigger chance that they could have cut my tumor the wrong way and just made a lot of more complications. So I did have my son naturally. I don't remember much of it. I remember passing out and being told to not go to sleep. I kind of remember saying they couldn't stop some bleeding. My husband says that I looked at my son. I don't remember that, which always kind of makes me a little sad, because I think I really thought my birthing experience was going to be different. I know motherhood is never what you plan it to be or how you want it to be, and I really didn't think that. Sorry, I'm getting a little sentimental. I didn't really think this is how I was going to start as a new mom. I know it's hard. I know it's hard, and I don't want to downplay. Yeah. I don't want to downplay anybody's parenting experience, because I know motherhood is hard, and it's not easy. There's a lot of ups and downs and everything, but I definitely wish I had gotten a different experience. I know that's not how I thought things were gonna be. So after that, I had my son. After I was, the bleeding has stopped and I was more conscious, I remember having him around the room, and he was such a perfect baby. I know all moms say that, but he's definitely such a perfect baby. And Tuesday, I had my lymph node biopsy. I went in for surgery at that time, so I had a 2-day-old child. And yes, puppy? Okay, it's yours? Okay, it's yours. That's fine. It could be yours. So this is motherhood, obviously. I'm trying to do something and it's not happening. So like I was saying, I have a 2-day-old and I go into surgery. I get my lymph node biopsy and I get a bone marrow biopsy. See, mi amor? Okay. Which wasn't fun, and at this time they decide to also put my son in the NICU because they realized he had jaundice and they were afraid of other things just since he was a preemie. So he got put into the NICU, which was really hard because then I'm here not seeing him, which is hard, and I'm telling these doctors that I don't have cancer, and they keep hinting at it, and they're like, it looks very suspicious, and you know, you need to prepare yourself. And I kept telling him, I was like, okay, but if it's not cancer, if it's just a tumor and it's benign, like, what's the recovery time? How long, like, when you take out this whole tumor, how long will I not be able to hold my son, and how long will I be able to breastfeed? And can I pump and dump? And I'm asking all these questions as somebody who is 100% sure that they're not sick, and they're literally telling me that I am, and I'm just like, nope, I'm not. I refused to believe I was sick until they told me I was sick, and even then, I was like, but how bad is it? Like where do I stand? Like, I know you're telling me stage 3, but like, where do I stand? So he's in the NICU, and on Wednesday they tell me my insurance no longer covers the night, but my son will be able to come home with me tomorrow afternoon. And I was like, okay. And I was pretty upset about leaving, and all the nurses and the doctors, like, I guess they all knew what was happening and what was coming, so they were, oh man, I'm gonna cry. Oh wait, I didn't think that was gonna happen. Sorry guys. Okay. So yeah. So it was definitely God's work that it was a slow hospital, I guess month or whatever it was, week or days. And in the maternity ward, there was only one other girl, myself, and 1 or 2 in the delivery section. So unless they delivered a baby, they would be moved over into like the postpartum section. And I got lucky that they had space. So they told me that I was technically discharged, but they would let my husband and I keep the room for the night. And I remember thinking, oh, this is awesome, and I'm not gonna have to leave him. And they left me all my bracelets on so that I can walk to the NICU and come back. And my husband and I would take turns going back and forth there. And I would at that time my tumor was getting bigger and more intense, so I was definitely more tired. And I just remember feeling like, I just can't wait for the tumor to be gone, because I really thought it was just a benign tumor that had gotten out of control because I didn't get my antibiotics and steroids till that day. Up until that day, I still remember feeling like that. We woke up the next day, and it was Thursday, and I remember feeling completely not myself. I barely could walk, and we went to go get breakfast because I'm not a patient anymore, so they're not bringing me breakfast. So I had to walk all the way to the cafeteria, and I remember that walk was the longest walk of my life to get there. And I took 2 bites, and I told my husband, I just need to sleep. I just need to sleep. And we walked back to the room, and this is when my memory starts to get a little choppy because I don't remember everything that happened. I remember going back to the room. I remember going to sleep and taking a nap. Oh, no. You're going to break that. Definitely not. No, thank you. Oh, it's somebody's hammer or something. Yeah, but that's okay. Let them be. We don't hammer. I remember feeling like forcing myself to take a nap and thinking if I sleep, I'll feel better. Like I just kind of was trying to find ways to make myself feel better. And I guess at one point, I don't know if I said something or if my husband noticed, and he called the nurse over, and I had 107.8 fever. So I was barely functioning. I remember I couldn't get up. I know that I couldn't get up. I couldn't walk myself to the ER, which was not far away. It was like steps away. So they got me a wheelchair, and the nurses wheelchaired me over. And I remember seeing my husband's face, and he was like really sad. And it always breaks my heart when I think about that, because it was a hard face. And then I kind of remember them putting cold blankets on me, and I think there was an IV. I don't remember, so I'm just gonna give you the big situation. I was rushed into the ER. They did what they I guess whatever they do to bring down that fever, and part of my biopsy had come in, and the biopsy showed that I had cancer. They told me that I had cancer, but I don't remember processing it until afterwards. And it was hard. And I remember being in that hospital room after they told us, because I still had that high fever, mind you, at this time. And, wow. And I sat, they were like, Dr. Min, which was my doctor in Westwood Hospital in New Jersey, told us that she couldn't treat my kind of cancer. She didn't feel confident that they had the right equipment in that hospital to be able to treat me effectively based on what she had already seen on the biopsy. And she didn't have a full biopsy, but from what she saw, she felt like maybe she wouldn't be the best person, which I admire that from her, because she took my life way into consideration, like into a higher consideration than I think. I know, Mommy did her hair today. Oh, you are. So Jovan now has this new obsession where he doesn't like my hair to be in a bun. He likes it to be in a clip. So I'm gonna have to switch my hair out. I think, I know this might not make sense, but I think a lot of it is because his whole life he has seen me without hair. So now that I have hair, he he doesn't like to see it up ever. This is how he likes it. He will find the clips. I try to hide them underneath like other stuff, and he always spots them. It's so funny. You're gonna get hurt. Okay, we're like tossing and turning here. So let me just. So like I was saying, I do admire the fact that she went out of her way and she called Dr. Feldman, which is one of the head people from the lymphoma department in Hackensack, and sent me right over. And she was leaving, Dr. Feldman, I remember. She had like some conference that she was gonna teach or some seminar that either she was speaking in or she needed to attend in Texas. And I had to sign a few waivers and disclosures that I was checking myself out, knowing that I still had this fever and all, like, I was doing the risk, the hospital wasn't liable and all of this. And they're like, you have to sign this and you have to go now. She's waiting for you. They made an appointment for you to see her before she leaves. And I called my mom and said, hey Mom, I'm checking out. The baby's staying in the NICU and I have cancer. I'm like, I have to go because I have to make another phone call. And she's like, no. She's like, stop playing. I was like, no, I really do. I was like, if you like, you can meet me at Hackensack, but don't bring Caesar. Caesar's my little brother. He's 9 now. So at the time he was 7. So I didn't want him to know. And she rushed to meet me at Hackensack Hospital. And I made other phone calls. I called my friend Bonnie, who has been like one of the most helpful people. She's a um, very Christian woman who has definitely helped me in that sense a lot. Like, I never have not been religious, but like I said before, I definitely have had those moments where I've distanced myself from God just because, you know, I'm human. I get mad, I get annoyed, I feel like I don't need him, and life definitely always has brought me back to him. And even though I'm not an every Sunday church goer, I do try to go often, and definitely we're trying to teach my son that church is important, and I do try to do things in that sense. No, we're not touching it here. But I called her, and we all met at Hackensack. I still had this fever that I felt like I could barely walk. I was completely out of it, and I was still processing the fact that I had cancer, but I was thinking, well, I mean, how bad could it really be? That was my outlook on everything. Like, how bad could this really be? And I almost felt like I wasn't allowed to have any emotion about it, because I saw my mom was really upset, and I could tell my husband was kind of upset and trying to be strong. So I definitely feel like this whole experience, like, I always force myself to be the strong one, because I feel like everybody else relies on me and depends on me to be, so I don't really feel like I have much of a choice but to be strong. And I got my diagnosis, and it's not the diagnosis I ultimately ended up with. They said that I had, she couldn't tell what stage I was. I remember her saying that she thought I had, she knew it was lymphoma. She had told me it was non-Hodgkin's, and she was like, well, if you're gonna have cancer, you want to have non-Hodgkin's versus Hodgkin's, or was it the other way? I don't know. Yeah. And I was like, well, why is that? She said, because it always reacts better to chemo. And I was like, oh, awesome. So like that means like I'm gonna get cured right away. Like, what am I looking at? Is it like what are my chances? I wanted a percentage. I remember that. I remember I wanted a percentage. And I was like, what are my odds? And she goes, you have like a 73% chance that you'll be in remission in 6 months. She's like, we're just gonna fight it aggressively, but you're gonna be doing a lot of chemo in a short period of time. You're definitely gonna lose your hair. You're gonna be very sick, and you have to be, there's gonna be a lot of rules. But if we treat this aggressively and quickly, you'll be fine. And I was like, oh, 73% chance? That's perfect. I'm like, I have beyond a fighting chance. Like, I'm gonna be okay. And I remember just kind of going home and thinking, well, I mean, I have cancer. And my husband went to pick up the baby because, of course, in the middle of that appointment, they call and say that my son is ready to be picked up. My husband is a mess. I can't go, even though I want to go. So my friend Bonnie drove my husband, which was really sweet of her, and drove with him. And then my mom took me home, and I remember this thought really, I don't know how to describe it, but it was definitely a very essential memory from that experience. That's kind of when I realized that I like have to kind of keep myself together. She called one of my aunts, and she called, the first person that she called, I remember exactly who it was my Aunt Mariana. No, that's not for you, honey. That's not for you. And I remember her sobbing while we were driving on our way home on the highway, and I was just like, I like literally sat there and said, Mom, it's okay, I'm gonna be fine. Like, there's nothing wrong with me. And that's kind of how I treated my whole treatment. Like, there's nothing wrong with me, I'm fine. I wasn't. Obviously, there's a lot of sucky days and there's a lot of hard times, and that's kind of why I feel like I needed to do this video blog situation, because I've kind of realized that I don't give myself enough liberty or permission to be a human being. Like, I feel like I have no choice but to always be strong, because when I'm not, I feel so guilty that somebody's gonna think like I'm not happy or content, which is something I really have a problem with. Anyway, so that's when I kind of figure like I kind of have to keep my stuff together. My mother-in-law cried, which I felt so bad. She's such a wonderful woman, and I remember calling her after I called my mother, and I'm sorry, guys. You know, this is what it's like to have a 2-year-old. So I know this is taking forever, and I'm definitely gonna cut it off from here, because if we keep talking about everything, it'd probably be like a 10-hour video if we get up to my legs. So I guess this will be the first part of it, and next time I have a little bit of time, I will definitely post another video, and I will explain how yes. Okay. Oh, but yeah, because we're hungry. Like, this means like we want to eat. But that weekend was a rough weekend. I had to make phone calls and texts and all this, and I wasn't up for it, but I felt like I didn't have a choice, because I didn't have a choice. And I remember I got a phone call Monday, and Dr. Feldman wasn't even in town. And she called me to tell me that the cancer she thought I had was not the cancer, that I had a more aggressive kind of cancer, and that she needed me to come in the next day, and we would start chemo that day, which was not what we had originally planned. I had originally planned to have like a week before starting to kind of like enjoy the baby. So I walked in and they told me I had stage 3 T-cell, 3 cells non-Hodgkin's. So she thought I had Hodgkin's. Non-Hodgkin's ALK-positive lymphoma. It's a mouthful and it's like annoying, but oh, you look so pretty. You look so pretty. You're so cute. And I might be wrong with this, like I said, because I really should have probably sat down and written these things down, because I'm kind of the person that if it's out of mind, it's out of sight, and I really don't try to think about it. I don't want to dwell on it. So I think the next video I'm going to have to definitely like look at my diagnosis, look through my paperwork, and really find out what everything happened. But I was stage 3, I had lymphoma. That's kind of like where we're at. And the chemo regimen was going to change, and it was going to be way more aggressive than that they were doing it, which was going to be harder on my body. And I would have to be quarantined for 10 days, but no people were visiting. I wasn't allowed to go anywhere because I wasn't going to have an immune system. And that's where I'm going to leave it. And then we'll start with next time with my first week of chemo and how sucky that was, and then the weeks following and the months following. I guess I'll try to do like that scoop, and then I'll see where I go from there. Thanks for listening, guys. Bye. Say bye-bye, Jovan.
Bye-bye.
Besitos? No, go look. Bye. Bye. Did un besito. Go. Oh, you're gonna give one to the camera? Okay, thank you. Goodbye, everybody.